Hello, everyone, and welcome to A2I Dyslexia podcast, all things dyslexia. Today's podcast is very, very special, very close to my heart. Title of it is Dyslexia and Disorganisation. Now, I don't want to speak for all dyslexics, but I know that for me as a dyslexic person, can be very disorganized. I don't plan it, it's just part of my dyslexia. I'm here today, I'm here tomorrow, I'm forgetting things, I'm getting lost everywhere. It can become really chaotic. Now, when we approached our guest, I was so happy to have her on our podcast because she's going to tell it as it is. I think we're actually fed up of masking things and hiding behind it all, making it all perfect. And we've got the amazing Natalie Brooks, who will be with us today to talk about dyslexia and disorganisation. She's an amazing social media guru. She's got her own podcast. She's got her own sort of all different social media on TikTok, and she's doing amazing work. And she's the founder of Dyslexia in Adults. Before we start, I'd like to say a big thank you to our funders, National Lottery Community Fund, the Social Enterprise Support Fund, and Resonance. We want to say a massive thank you for the funding that we get to be able to produce this podcast. Natalie, welcome to A2I Dyslexia podcast. How are you?
Hello, thank you so much for having me. Wow, a bit bowled over after that lovely introduction.
It's amazing to have you on our podcast. And like I said in the introduction, dyslexia and disorganisation, sometimes we just got to be real and say it
100%.
as it is.
Yeah.
I've been hiding.
Yeah, if we don't, then we just create shame, right, with other people. And the reality is that we need to talk about the wider view of dyslexia. You know, spelling and reading is an important part of dyslexia, but it is only a couple of pillars of the challenges. You can have challenges, you can still have strengths, it can be both. Let's talk about it like how the people that live it know what is actually going on.
Absolutely. Now, before we start, Natalie, tell our listeners a little bit about your background, who you are, and why you decided to set up Dyslexia in Adults.
Yeah, sure. So basically, I was incredibly lucky and had my dyslexia picked up really young. And I went to schools that were supportive of dyslexia. And so I really had this understanding of like the value of support. And I feel like I learned how to educate myself. I understood how I learned, it wasn't easy, but I knew how to do it. I'd become an expert in Natalie's learning style. And I went through university, I did A-levels and GCSEs. And again, I'm not saying it was a walk in the park, but I was getting good grades. I was achieving. I knew what I had to do, and I felt like I was thriving in my way. I left university and I just crumbled. I felt like I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to handle my dyslexia. There's all this like stuff that goes on as an adult with dyslexia that we just don't have any resources for. Like, how do you tell your boss you're dyslexic? What do you say? How do you ensure that you don't get a negative perception on it? Or if you're having your probation extended because of your dyslexia, or many people are fired because they're dyslexic, all these things are happening. Or, you're making mistakes at work because maybe you're struggling with verbal instructions or organization, I'm going to talk about today. Whatever it is, spelling and reading by this point as an adult was like back of the list of the problems. I was struggling with verbal instructions, organization, confidence, like an understanding of what I was good at, dealing with like making those little mistakes, those tiny little like moments. I lost one company over £5,000. I was struggling and there was nowhere to turn. And I didn't want to talk about just the strengths of dyslexia. I wanted exactly what this podcast is all about, to be like, okay, how do I turn up to a meeting 3 hours early and not look like an idiot in front of my like clients, because I was an account manager at the time, and like how do I deal with these moments? Like what do I do? And there was basically, at the time, I realize now there's a lot of people actually doing a lot, and I see how much the dyslexia community is trying. But at the time, I was like, I'm alone. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to turn. No one is talking about dyslexia in the way that I see dyslexia. I felt like I Googled dyslexia and all I got is like how to learn to read. And I was like, no, I've got that. I've covered that. So what I purely out of like a sense of desperation and frustration, I started an Instagram account called Dyslexia and Adults that was just about me telling it as it is, being like, this is what's going on, this is the reality of my life. And my goal has always been to talk about both. Like, just because I'm struggling doesn't mean I don't have strengths. I think this narrative that in like with dyslexic people that like if you're struggling, dyslexic strengths don't exist. I was like, no, I'm struggling, but I'm still really great at all these things. I just haven't found a way to like deal with the challenges or like let my strengths shine in the way that they can. So I wanted to talk about all of that, like what it was like to date with dyslexia. Like, you know, you have to tell people you're dyslexic and when you're dating, create a space to talk about what it felt like was going on. And unbelievably, 3 years later, this is now my full-time job, like working with dyslexic adults, helping them with all the things that I talked about, like discussing letting your strengths shine, dealing with the challenges, but dealing with the confidence issues, dealing with the conversations that we just don't know how to have, like telling your boss, or like dealing with someone who's saying to you, oh, like everyone's a bit dyslexic, and you're like, no, they're not. And just all of that kind of stuff. Anyway, it's not a sales pitch, but that's basically what I do. That's the kind of my life now. And I'm literally the luckiest person in the world. I started something because I needed it for myself, and now I get to help thousands of other people with the same thing that I struggle with, and it just feels like the best thing in the world.
Of course, yeah. And I do think that sometimes it's the best thing to do is to be real, because for example, where, you know, with HY dyslexia, we can talk about these things, you know, openly, whilst as not everybody can. I mean, I hear things like superpower, you know, gift and all that, and you know, great. That's the day when the superpower wants to work, because there are days when you just feel like, listen, your whole world is caving in, and you can't get beyond that. And you know, of course, when I gave the introduction, I spoke about disorganized. I am the most disorganized person you could find.
I'm giving you a run for your money, 100%.
Trust me.
Well, I'm confident that I'm worse.
Honestly, and of course, you know,
we can have a debate as to who's worse, but I'm fully.
But of course, you know, you have to put on, you know, I don't know whether we mask it or whatever, you know, and try to fit into that box that isn't really made for us. You know, I mean, we are known as, some of us have known as out of the box thinkers, but surely we're not actually exhibiting that, are we? Because we're trying to fit with society how it should be. I'm going on to my first question, believe it or not. After all that, yes. So what is the reality of being disorganized and living with dyslexia? And you've also got ADHD, haven't you?
So yeah, reality of being disorganized and living my life. I see, in my experience of speaking to thousands of dyslexic people every day, dyslexic people tend to fall into two categories, in my experience. Is there are the people who are so nervous and worried about making mistakes that they have such rigid structures that they manage to like lean on as a crutch, and they manage to not be disorganized, or, you know, not have as many dyslexic challenges because they stick to those systems and structures, like it, like, you know, like it is their lifeblood, it's like their oxygen. And I am so jealous of that type of dyslexic person, because that is not me. I do not enjoy a rigid structure. It does not work for me. I never have been able to stick to them. And I work on a topic that I like to think of as something called radical acceptance. I am disorganized, and that is a reality of my life. And I think actually, in a funny way, my experience is that by accepting that I am naturally disorganized is like the best way I can create systems and structures.
Yeah.
So I'll say to people, listen, I'm really not great at like turning up to meetings. So like, please send me a reminder, or like, please put it in my calendar, like in this way. The amount of people that send me calendar invites as an email with a Zoom notification, I'm like, well, I'm not turning up to that. Yeah. I'm like, that's not happening. Yeah. So I was like, good luck. Because I was like, either you send me a calendar invite or you send me a reminder, or it's not happening. And so I think, you know, like, or another like example for me is like I often like really just get like dates mixed up in my head. I hold dates in my head and I'm just like, oh yeah, that's the 20th, it's on the 25th at 11, and it's like it's never the 25th at 11. And like people who love me will often, like if it's a doctor's appointment or like something like that, will often be like, Nat, can you just tell me when this thing is, because I really don't want you to miss it. So they will like text me or remind me, or you know, something like that. So I think I kind of create structures, but ones that are kind of working on the assumption of failure.
And that's what makes you who you are,
Yeah,
isn't it? And I mean, I've often said if there was some kind of pill we could take to make that brain be stable and be very organized, I don't know if you would.
I've been asked this question before, and yeah, and I think do you know what I'm like, I'm a big believer in, and what I try and like teach people through my like social media and my kind of company is, the thing is that so much of dyslexia is two sides of a coin. So you've got the like disorganization, like, you know, chaotic element of like our lives, but you've also got this amazing problem solving. And I'm kind of really proud of the amount of scrapes I get myself out of. Like I actually find it like low-key amusing, like seeing a scrape coming up, like something's happened, I've like accidentally messed up in some way, and then like watching my brain be like, okay, I've got 10,000 ways that we're going to get out of this, like which one are we going to choose? And it's like a Rolodex moment where my brain is like we've got to like fix this problem super quickly, and then bam, we're straight out of it like in a couple of minutes. I almost enjoy that experience. I mean, it's taken a lot of acceptance and self-kindness and understanding that hating myself just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So learning to just be like, all right, I'm like this, and you know, everyone has flaws and this just happens to be mine, and learning to kind of step back and say, okay, really disorganized, also really good at getting myself out of these situations. You know, you can center yourself on the fact that you made the mistake, or you can center yourself on the fact that you're great at getting out of it, and I center myself on the fact that I'm great at getting out of it.
Yes. But if you messed up something in your own organization, you would probably think, oh, actually, I'll quickly fix that. Or I may not turn up for that meeting because someone understands. What if you work in a corporate world? That's not the same.
One thing I would really recommend for anyone who's in the corporate space, one of the things I struggle with giving advice to dyslexic people, I'm just going to caveat this advice, is that sometimes I don't want the answers that are the answers to be true. And this is a perfect example of that. I'd love to tell you that if you put an extra reminder in your calendar, but the thing is, in my experience, systems and structures always eventually let us down, because that's just the reality of life. But what I have noticed does really work, and like I said, I don't want this to be the answer, but this is my experience and I want to give the raw honesty.
Yes.
Is that how you handle yourself is a huge, huge way as to what implications you will have from those moments. So when you make a dyslexic mistake, and if it's organization and you know you're whatever it is, if you crumble in that moment, if you kind of handle it badly, of like maybe getting like really flustered, or if you are like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, I'm so useless, like I'm just such a nightmare, like if you kind of let that energy be seen by the people around you, it has a huge impact in how you'll be perceived.
Absolutely. And I've been there before, so I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Or if you handle it with serenity, calm, confidence, and like you know, an element of dignity, like, I am so sorry I'm late for this meeting, I don't know what happened, like this is genuinely a one-off, I really will endeavor to ensure this doesn't happen again, like thank you so much for your patience, really looking forward to, you know, work, like starting this meeting, you know, that's an example, if you went late for a meeting, whatever it is.
Yeah.
If you handle it with a quiet confidence, you'd be so surprised how much people kind of like let these things slide.
Yes.
And they can have such a like lesser impact than if you kind of like crumble. The thing is that I learned this from real experience of like doing both and living both realities of like crumbling, being embarrassed, being like, do you know what, I'm just like always late to things. And it's like, that's the worst thing you can do. So in my experience with the corporate world is, if you can find a way, even if you are spiraling out with shame, because that is so often what happens to us when we make dyslexic mistakes.
Yeah.
You are hating yourself, just like wishing in every fiber of your body that you weren't dyslexic and this mistake hadn't happened. If you can just find a way of quietly, calmly collecting yourself and not letting that show, and eventually working to just actually not let that happen at all, that is one of the best things that you can do for yourself, to kind of really ensure that these things don't have a substantial like knock-on implications.
Now, we all know, you and I know, that it's not all about just being late. It's other things as well, you know, like going to the wrong place, finding the wrong building. Oh, you know, the list is forever.
Not
On and
showing
on
up
and on and on.
at all.
Or not showing up at all.
Not
Yes,
showing up at all.
that's happened to me in the past, I must say.
Mm.
Had a meeting and person stood there waiting for me and I completely forgot. So dates and times is also a problem for me. Yeah. Now, what are some of the impact of being disorganized?
Yeah, I think, you know, when you're disorganized, there, I mean, firstly, you miss out on stuff, right? And there's also a dyslexic tax. Like, you know, we often hear about people say, oh, like an ADHD tax, but I think the reality is that there is a dyslexic tax. I've turned up to flights and they've been like, oh no, Natalie, your flight is tomorrow. And I was like, oh, let me pay the change fee then. And over the credit card goes. So I think, you know, obviously there's the perception thing that we talked about, and like, you know, we've already talked about how to handle that. I now realize how this is so normal, and the reality is that so many dyslexic people, I don't think I know a dyslexic person who doesn't have like one of those moments who they've paid for something wrong, or like, you know, they paid for something expensive, it's ended up being wrong, and they just kind of had to like swallow the money. And it's just an element of an unfortunate reality that you just have to like learn to smile at.
Oh, bless you. I'm just going to go on to my last question. What strategies do you have in place to help you? Now, people talk about Calendly, people talk about this, people talk about that. You know, they talk about putting things on, reminders on your phone. I do all that and I still forget to have a look. What strategies do you have in place?
I think the one thing, like I said at the beginning, is I expect to fail. So I kind of like work on the assumption that it's never going to go well. So I kind of put as many like limits on kind of as many kind of ways I can to remind myself, particularly if it's something important.
Yeah.
So, you know, there are reminders, there's like people texting me, there's reminders on my phone. They all catch a lot, and they do a lot. I think also what I talked about with radical acceptance is about saying, I will miss some. It won't always go smoothly. There might be bad days. There will be problems, and I've done a lot of work, and I have really tried, and I have to continue to do this work. Is to say to myself, I'm more than these mistakes. I'm more than these moments. I deserve the kindness of others around me to manage these moments, and I expect, like on this deadly serious, kindness, understanding, like people to like be flexible with me. And the reason
And
for that,
patience as well. Yeah.
exactly. And I kind of go into every scenario, and if a mistake has been made, it's never nice, particularly if it's like is something important and it is someone external, and you know you're like the way you know are perceived as important. And but I think when you hold yourself and you say, do you know what, I am worth kindness, patience, and understanding and flexibility, because I have something to offer, because
Yes.
I am capable of so much more than this moment. I think that is the way you are often treated. If you kind of like let people treat you badly, and then you let that moment kind of like seem like a bigger deal, going back to what we talked about before, it often ends up becoming that way. And again, I am talking 100% from experience of letting myself be treated badly, letting people see myself as being defined by these moments. And more and more and more, when I walk in with a really serious expectation of like, if you laugh at like these situations and I don't find it funny, I'm going to tell you I don't find it funny.
Absolutely.
And I'm gonna really like be serious when I say that. So I think holding myself in that way, and this is really a self-reflection piece of looking inwards and really seeing yourself as more than these mistakes.
Yes.
Once you see yourself as more than them, that is where you are able to, in a very serious way, like demand respect, kindness, flexibility, that you're able to kind of like handle these situations differently and get different results from them. So I think it's a combination of how I handle them, is a combination of doing my utmost to try and minimize them, and acceptance that they won't always be minimized, and a grounding that I am more than these moments. Because
absolutely,
if you don't see yourself as more than these moments, it will get you into a whole world of pain.
Absolutely. And what happens with that is confidence and your self-esteem and your mental health and anxiety and all those kind of things. And I couldn't agree with you more, honestly.
It's a representation of how you feel about yourself, and it so often has more like limitations than you realize with that. So once I started to be like, okay, I might turn up to the meeting late. I have really tried to not turn up to the meeting late, and I'm proud of the fact that I have put in every step possible. But when I do turn up to the meeting, I am able to create great ideas, come like with like an opportunity to like see things differently, and like bring something to the table with clear communication, all of those things that not everyone else is able to do. And once you come with that energy, it really does make a huge difference. But unfortunately, it's a lot about doing the self-worth work of understanding what those realities are for you, and
absolutely
and so you can hold yourself that way.
Yeah, and I think also sometimes when you sort of say all these negative things about yourself, people pick up on that and you become quite vulnerable. And sometimes people can use that against you.
I completely agree. Do you know what I say so often to my community is that you are giving them the stick to beat you with?
Absolutely.
I remember once when I had my probation extended at a very like well-known company, I used to say like, I'm sorry, I'm just not getting this. Like, there's just so much information and I can't process it. Like, I don't understand what's going on. And like, and it's just like, it's not making sense. And the reality is that I do have slow processing and things do take me a little bit longer. And also because I'm dyslexic, I want that big picture thinking. So I think I need to know everything. I think that I need every single piece of information. And then actually, when I was like quizzed by my manager, she was like, you actually know a lot, like, and you understand like more than you think. But I was so nervous that I didn't feel like I understood everything, and that I felt like things were taking me ages, which maybe they were, maybe they weren't. It's been a long time. I'm not even sure at this point. They extended my probation and they used the words back at me. They said, you said you are struggling to understand this, and that is a concern for us, so we need to give some more time.
Exactly.
And then all of this stuff, and I mean, I have 100 examples of people have used my own words back at me. And the thing is that like at the time I used to be like, I can't believe they said that to me, and now I like have the kind of grace to be like,
that's because I said it.
You kind of did that to yourself a little bit there. Like, I mean, it is because of the shame and the trauma and the way that dyslexia was dealt with when I was at school, which was so centered on like, I can't. Like, I'm so glad that I can see how powerful it is to have made that change. And also I think I understand that it's a proportion of like the way that people have treated me over the years, and it's also an element of like I really need to do some self-reflection, and I kind of like see a little bit of like an element of needing to do the work myself as well.
Excellent. Well, look at you today. You know, you're helping millions and millions of people out there.
You wouldn't recognize like old Natalie. Like if she'd have come on this podcast, it would have been an entirely I don't recognize myself when I hear myself talking and I say things like, oh, I'm good at this, I'm good at that. It used to be a 10-minute caveat if I had to say I was good at something. But, oh, well, I'm not always perfect. And like sometimes it doesn't make sense. And trust me, there's totally things that are bad. And I'm like, you should see the list of mistakes. Blah, 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 blah. And then I would be like, and sometimes I'm okay at this. Like, and it's just like, what? Oh, like it's okay to see one or two things are good and okay. And to be proud of. It doesn't kill you.
Honestly, it's been such an amazing podcast. Thank you so much for coming on to HY Dyslexia, All Things Dyslexia podcast. Today's topic, dyslexia and disorganisation, real. We said it as it is. We'd like to say thank you to our listeners and obviously to our funders and the amazing Yola, who's behind the scenes making all this possible. We also want to say thank you to Onye-Morris for the research that she does and for finding Natalie and many more people that we've had on our podcast. We'd like to say thank you. Have a wonderful time, and we'll see you next week, same time, same place. Bye-bye for now.
The Aspire to Inspire All Things Dyslexia podcast is funded by National Lottery Community Fund, Social Enterprise Support Fund, and Resonance Limited. It's presented by Elizabeth Takyi and produced and distributed by Salt and Pepper Productions.